What's up, Claude coders? Welcome to yet another tutorial to get the best out of your Claude Code experience. Now today's tutorial is one that you don't want to miss because I'm sure you must be hearing about Kimi K2, a model released by Moonshot AI, and how it's taking the world by storm. And while there's a lot of news out there, I'll just summarize it in 3 ways. Number 1, it's as good or if not more powerful than Claude 4. Number 2, it can be up to 90% cheaper to run than Claude 4. And the third thing is that if you know how to set it up correctly, you can even get it to run at a blazing fast speed as well. On top of these 3 things, it's completely open source. So in today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how you can integrate this new model with Claude Code. And what's more, it not only applies to this new Kimi model, you'll be able to use Claude Code with pretty much any model out there. In my own repositories, using these techniques, I was able to get things that took a minute plus down to about 20 seconds, give or take. And with these speed efficiencies coupled with the cost savings, it's just a no-brainer to give this a try. Yeah, so that's the reason why this is definitely giving Anthropic a run for its money. I've made everything related to this video available in my Insiders Club. It's completely free to join, and within it, I provide a lot of additional material related to my videos. For example, you get full lesson summaries and early previews of upcoming content. And for today's video, all of the resources, including the configuration files, the scripts, and everything you need to be able to get everything working is available for free in my Insiders Club. So don't forget to head on over to the link in the description to gain full access to all of these resources. All right, let's get started.
So the first way for you to be able to change your provider for Claude Code is going to be the simplest. And all it takes is just 2 lines. So what you're going to be doing is that you'll be setting 2 environment variables within your command line. You'll be setting something called the Anthropic-based URL to the one that's provided by Moonshot, who are the creators of Kimi K2. The second thing that you'll be doing is setting the Anthropic auth token. And instead of putting in your Anthropic token, you'll be putting in your Kimi API key over here, and then you just run as per usual. In order for you to get an API key, head on over to moonshot.ai, type in platform.moonshot.ai, and that should redirect you towards the documentation. At the top right-hand corner, you should see console. Click on that, and this will bring you to a sign-on page in which you'll be able to sign in with Google. Once you sign in, head on over to API keys over here, click on Create API Key, and in this case, you can just give it any name that you want, and set the project to the default one, and you will see this modal pop up. Make sure to copy this API key before you close this window, because once you've closed it, you will never be able to see it again. And then before you proceed to put this into your terminal, you will need to add some funds into your account. Putting in $10 is going to be more than enough for what we're going to accomplish here today, and it will likely be more than enough for whatever project that you're working on. I've already got some funds within it, so I can head on back into the terminal. And in this case, I will just replace this placeholder here with the key that I just got. So all you have to do here is just copy these 2 things, pop into the terminal, and then you just run Claude as per usual. And what you will notice is that you will see this thing called overrides, and you will see that the API base URL has been overridden to the one that we specified. And now you can just run all your Claude commands as per usual, such as init. And what will happen is that everything will look as per usual, but it will actually be running by the Moonshot team themselves. For those of you who are not familiar with what the command does, it actually scans through an existing code base, helps Claude get a full understanding of what the structure is like, and then kind of prepares everything with a Claude.md file that will get created at the root of the project so that it provides it with sufficient context about the entire project. If you haven't already checked out my previous video where I covered the init command and 7 other hacks about using Claude Code with your project, you should definitely check it out. It provides you with a lot of tips about how to get the best out of Claude Code. And you can see it's completed now. And if we just open up our file explorer, you can see that it's created it over here. This Claude.md file, which I will open a preview of, actually provides an entire overview of this project. As you can see here, it's gotten a really accurate picture of what this repository is. This is actually a full repository containing the source code of my Google Agent Development Kit crash course, which covers everything that you need to know about using Google's latest AI stack for building multi-agent systems. And if you want to know more about how to do so, definitely check out the link in the description below about this crash course as well. There you have it. Now you've seen how you can simply just replace these exports within your terminal so that you'll be able to redirect Claude to the Moonshot hosted URL to run the Kimi K2 model. Now, setting these environment variables each time can be quite annoying, especially when you create a new terminal or if you're running this repeatedly with a new session. So one quick tip that you can do over here is that if you actually open up your bash rc file, or if you're on a Mac, it's going to be the zshrc file, and I'm going to open this up in Cursor over here. What you can do is actually at the top of your file, create a custom function, which I'm going to call Kimi over here. And then you can set the environment variables within this function itself. So I'm going to replace this placeholder token here with the token that we got previously. And then I'm going to save. And then what you can do here is you do source and then you do bash rc C file, or you can actually simply just kill the terminal and then open a new one again. You can just type Kimi, and then this will automatically set the variables for you and run Claude Code in a single line. And so now you can actually run Claude Code with Kimi with all the environment variables being set with just a single command. And this is a great convenience function and a great hack so that you don't have to keep setting the environment variables each time. Now, one thing that you notice about what we are doing here is you can see that the current API is under quite heavy load. In fact, generation speed is actually slower now because there are a lot of people who are accessing this API URL. So I'm going to show you an alternative way of accessing the Kimi model, which can be extended to other models. And this method will help you to overcome the situation where there are too many people accessing a single URL. All right, so in this second method of how we're going to actually use Claude Code with a different model, we're going to be using this great project called Claude Code Router. This project is really cool because it allows Claude Code to make requests to different models, and you can even customize the request if you wanted to. You can actually target not just Kimi, but DeepSeek. You can even run things against a local LLM, like using Onama. You can run things against Gemini as well. But one of the great things about this is that you can actually use something called OpenRouter. What OpenRouter is a unified way of accessing LLMs. What this means is that using just a single base URL, you can then target more than 400 different models that you see over here. But the great thing about OpenRouter is not just the number of models, but the number of providers of these models. So for example, if we go to Kimi K2 over here, we were previously accessing things via Moonshot AI's own platform. And this can sometimes face latency issues or throughput issues. OpenRouter allows you to access the same model, in this case Kimi K2, but then via different providers. So for example, you can see that this one over here with its provider in the US provides latency that's pretty much an order of magnitude lower than if you were accessing it via Moonshot. So OpenRouter provides a really good way for you to access these different models and providers. And like I mentioned, it has many different models beyond Kimi K2. It also has Mistral, it has Groq by xAI, and the Gemini models by Google, and many others. So being able to access the OpenRouter platform via this Claude Code router is a really powerful way to use Claude Code. And the best thing about this router is that you just need to install it with a single command line. The most complicated aspect is configuring something called the Claude Code Router config.json, because you need to be able to specify which providers you want. In some cases, you need to add some additional configuration to them just to make sure that they work correctly. So in this case, they are called transformers. When you're using the OpenRouter provider, you will need to use the OpenRouter transformer. When you're using the Gemini models, you will need to use the Gemini router, and in other cases, you may not need one at all. But don't worry, I will be showing you an exact example of the config file that I use myself that will enable you to use Claude Code against any provider and any model that you wish. All right, let's get started. So the way that we will actually be doing this is that we will run this command here to install it within our terminal. So I'm just going to go back into Cursor. I'm just going to create a new terminal. And then I'm just going to paste in the installation that's laid up. Now that the installation is done, I'm clear the screen again. And all you need to do is CCR. And then you can just do help just to see what different functions there are. And the best thing to do is to first do CCR and then do start. The first time you run this, it will actually ask you to set up the very first provider and model that you want to use. And what we're going to do is that we're going to use the provider, which is from Moonshot.ai themselves. So this should bring us as close in performance to when we were actually running Claude Code using the export method from before. I'm going to move this up a little bit. In this case, I'll call it Moonshot. And the provider key, this key over here, is going to be the key that we had from Moonshot from earlier. So I'm just going to paste this in. And then the provider URL, this is going to be different from what we were using before. So before this, we were doing api.moonshot.ai/Anthropic. In this case, we will be doing api.moonshot.ai/v1. And then this is very important. You need to put /chat/completions. And the model name here will be as follows. It's going to be Kimi K2 0711-preview. All right. Now that the router is running, the way that you can start Claude Code using this router is by doing CCR and then space code. And as this launches Claude Code, all right, so now that this has shown up, you can see that its API base URL is pointing to something on localhost. And this is actually hitting the router that you can see on the left-hand side. So now all of your requests will be going to the Kimi model at moonshot.ai. And let's actually just give this a whirl now. So I'm going to do /init as we did before. And you can see on the left-hand side, the router is actually handling all of the messages that are going to and from the moonshot.ai endpoint. And then it's actually performing the init step as we did earlier when we were running it with the export method. We're just going to let this run to completion. And what we would like to see at the end of this is that it should create a Claude.md file within the file structure. This has run to completion now. And it says that it needs to make this edit. And so we're just going to click yes. And just going to drag this down. You can see it's done a very similar thing to what it did before. It effectively has initialized the Claude.md file with a summary of this repository. All right, so just to explain this a little bit more, I'm going to open the configuration file for the router by doing cursor, and then I'm going to access it at Claude Code router/conduct.json. All right, now that we have this configuration file showing up, you can see that under providers, there is one provider, which is the one that we actually configured. And the main thing that we want to point out here is that we have one default router that we have in place, which in this case is going to be the Moonshot provider, which we specified over here, and then this model that it has over here. And this is just to explain what this syntax over here means. All right, and so if you actually look at this, the total duration on the API was 1 minute and 13 seconds. And if you actually compare it very quickly to what we had before, it's about 1 minute, 47 seconds. And I am running this several hours later than previously. And we kind of expect that because at the end of the day, we are hitting the same base URL, which is moonshot.ai. So you would expect that the handling would be not too different from each other. So now that we've done it with this method, different approach for you to make use of the Kimi K2 model using OpenRouter. And remember, the reason why you want to use OpenRouter is that it actually does automatic switching of your requests to the best providers to handle your prompt size and parameters. So we'll actually be able to automatically switch between different providers rather than relying on moonshot.ai. So the way that you do so is that you just create a new entry over here and effectively copy the same structure that you had before. In this case, for name, I'm going to put OpenRouter. And then for the API base URL, you're going to use the following. You're going to use the v1 chat completions endpoint, but this time it's going to point to OpenRouter. And the API key here is something that you will need to generate within OpenRouter itself. So I'm going to switch over to OpenRouter. I'm going to do keys, and then I'm going to create a new one here and call it Claude tutorial. And then I'm going to create this, and I've got the key here. Again, you want to copy this immediately so that you can make use of it, because once you close this model, you will actually use it entirely. And so I'm going to pop in the key over here. I'm actually going to specify 2 of them right now just to showcase to you. The first thing you will see is that the way that OpenRouter identifies models is going to be different from how Moonshot does it. You can actually get these things by going into OpenRouter itself. So as you can see here, Kimi K2 would be under the Moonshot AI/Kimi-K2. So I'll pop that over here. And I've actually added in a second model just for comparison's sake to show you how you can put in Google Gemini 2.5 Pro. And if you actually just search for Gemini 2.5 Pro, you can see that this matches this slug over here. So this is how you actually specify different models within OpenRouter. And finally, we're going to change the default over here. And that's all you need to do to configure Claude Code Router to be able to use OpenRouter. Let's just give this a shot right now. So I'm going to create a new terminal, and I'm going to do CCR start. All right, so we are over here now. I'm going to open up a side terminal again, and then I'm going to do CCR code. And you can see here, once again, it's hitting our router on the left-hand side, and then on this right-hand side, and you can confirm this because the API base URL is pointing to localhost. And so I'm going to delete the Claude.md file and then run init one more time. All right, so over here, as you can see, that it says API error, and it says that No endpoint found that support cache control. And the reason for this is that you will need to add the following into your config file for OpenRouter. So after models, you will need to specify the transformer and use the OpenRouter transformer. But effectively, what these transformers do is adapt the Claude Code request when it hits different endpoints. So for the OpenRouter vendor, when it hits the endpoints of different vendors, and they all do things slightly differently. So these transformers, like the one that you have over here, help to adapt it appropriately. And if you actually read the README, you can see that this transformer removes the cache control parameter, which was exactly the issue that we saw over here. All right, so I'm just going to kill this for a second. And I'm going to clear my terminal again, and I'm going to run it one more time. So CCR start, and then CCR code on the right-hand side. And I'm going to type /nit, and let's just let this roll. And you can see that now this has kicked off, and it's using OpenRouter. It's using the router that we have locally, but it's hitting the OpenRouter endpoint rather than the Moonshot AI endpoint. One thing you'll notice about using Claude Code Router is that sometimes after tool calls, you will need to prompt it again in order to get it to continue moving. And it sometimes occurs, and this is something that sometimes occurs, and I know that they are aware of this issue. When this occurs, all you need to do is just type in a prompt, and it does occur fairly sporadically for me. Sometimes it doesn't occur at all, as we saw with the Moonshot.API, and in other instances, it occurs quite frequently. So anyway, the way that you overcome this is just by adding in any prompt. Usually I just use continue, and then that will help to kickstart this. So this is the current workaround for now. And so finally, it's done over here, and I'm just going to say yes to write this to Claude Code, to the Claude.md file. And so you can see, very similar to what we had previously, the Claude.md file contains the project overview. If you look at a summary of the duration right now, you can do a quick comparison to when we were running this previously. So the duration time for the API calls was roughly 1 minute 13 seconds the last time, and this time it's about 1 minute, so slightly faster. All right, so with that done, I've demonstrated to you how you can use OpenRouter. And just for completion, you can actually swap this out with Gemini 2.5 Pro over here. And in this case, I'm not going to do CCR start and CCR code separately. I'm just going to do CCR code directly, and this will actually automatically start the service in the background. And I'm going to delete this Claude.md file again and run init and see what happens. So in this case, it's going to be hitting OpenRouter using Claude Code, but this time it's going to be using the Gemini 2.5 Pro model. And this is the power of using Claude Code Router together with OpenRouter. You now have the ability to use Claude Code with any provider that OpenRouter provides. And you can see that it's now completed. I'm going to say yes. And it's going to finish writing the file up here, which is just showing up right now. And it's now done with the summary. So I'm going to kill this console. And you can see roughly 1 minute and 2 seconds. So very comparable to what we had when we were running it earlier. You'll probably get a slightly different summary that comes out because it's using a different model. So this is the great thing about using Claude Code Router together with OpenRouter, because now you can actually use Claude Code with pretty much any model out there. Now, the final thing that I wanted to show you is that rather than using Moonshot directly or using OpenRouter, there is something different called Groq. Groq with a Q, not to be confused with Twitter or XAI's Groq with a K. Groq here is a platform that is very similar to OpenRouter, but it actually does something different with how it serves up the models for inference, which makes it extremely fast. And this doesn't just apply to Kimi, it actually applies to all of the different models that they have within the platform. There are fewer models compared to OpenRouter, as you can see over here, but they tend to be a lot faster. And you can actually surf through Twitter or X to see comparisons of the speed when you're using Groq versus using OpenRouter or directly hitting the Moonshot API. So it would be very useful if we can actually leverage the speed that Groq provides together with Claude Code. And I'm going to show you how right now. So switching back to the config file, we're going to add one more provider over here. In this case, what we're going to do is that we're going to call the name, and it says the API base is going to be api.groq.com OpenAI v1 chat completions. So different from what we had above, but the main thing is to see that it's hitting the Groq domain. The way you create an API key is very similar. So you can go up here and you can do create API key. And I really like Groq's way of getting you an API key. It's just front and center of the dashboard. So I'm going to copy this. And so I'm just going to paste this in over here. And then for the models over here, it's actually Moonshot AI Kimi K2 instruct, which is different from OpenRouter and is also different from Moonshot directly. The Kimi model is actually slightly hidden. It's actually over here. So you click over here. You can see that the slug is Moonshot AI /Kimi K2 instruct. So you can copy this and you can pop this in, which Cursor has automatically computed for me. Now, the final thing in order for this to work is that you would need to use the following transformers. Okay? So the first thing you need to do is that you will need to use the OpenRouter transformer, just as previously, but then you will need to add this custom transformer where you set the max tokens directly. You have to provide it in this way in order for the inference to work. All right, so let's create a new terminal once again. Quite a lot of these stacking up right now. And we'll do CCR code. Oh, and before I forget, we also need to switch the default router to what we have defined within the config file. Okay. All right, so we're going to do CCR code. And we will start the service. And then it will launch Claude Code. And then we're going to do it again. So we're going to renit. And let's see what happens. All right, so it says the file doesn't exist. And it's doing the analysis of the file system. So you can see this has finished a lot quicker than any of the other providers that you saw from previously. It's about a third of the time that it took to finish it on both OpenRouter as well as Moonshot. So there you have it. 4 different ways that you can use Claude Code with custom models. The first way was to just specify the export path, but then this may not work for every single model. The second way was to use Claude Code Router and then hit the view check completions endpoint of the provider itself. And then the third way is to use OpenRouter, which gives you access to more than 400 different models, and you'll be able to benefit from OpenRouter's auto-switching and fallback mechanisms. And then the final way that I demonstrated to you is to actually use the Groq platform, where you get to benefit from their blazing fast inference speed. One other thing that I did not mention about using Claude Code Router is that you can actually specify not just the default router, but if you actually check the README, you can set different models for different tasks. So for example, you can set a background model, which oftentimes people like to set it to a very small, locally running LLM. Reasoning, however, this is beyond the scope of today's tutorial. If you'd like to see my setup for using Claude Code Router with different models in order to optimize and get the best out of Claude Code, do let me know in the comments, and if there's enough interest, be able to create a tutorial showcasing that.
I really hope that you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you found this helpful, don't forget to give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so that you'll always be the first to know whenever new tutorials like this drop. If you haven't already checked out my other video on how to get the best out of Claude Code, I'll highly recommend you check it out. But it's packed with, in my opinion, the best 8 tips that you can have when working with Claude Code. So you can check out the video right over here. Alright, till next time, see ya!